I'm going to invite the Secretary of the General Conference, who's got a few things that we need to clear up before we begin our work this afternoon.
The first item we have, if Sue Sullivan can make her way to one of the floor microphones. I understand you have a report for us from the Committee on Courtesies and Privileges. Sue Sullivan, if you could make your way to a microphone.
If you'll go to microphone number 1,
She's
think that's the
gonna be
closest.
at 1.
Sue Sullivan, Chair, Committee on Courtesies and Privilege, Texas Annual Conference, Laity. Our committee met during the lunch hour. We had 2 items to review. One was from a statement of appreciation that we would like to join with Gene Hawksworth from Kentucky in giving our public thanks to all our ecumenical partner churches and other Methodist families around the world who have currently been in prayer for us during our sessions. Our second item is that our Committee on Courtesies and Privileges would like to recommend a moment of personal privilege at the end of our plenary session of today's proceeding to allow Donna Pritchard to make a comment. It is our recommendation that she be allowed to do that for a moment at the end of this session before our worship.
We will schedule that just prior to the closing statements.
And we did put as time allows.
Great, thank you very much for your report. Bishop, that is the end of our housekeeping moments as we begin the afternoon session.
Great. Thank you all. I'm Bishop Cynthia Fierro Harvey, and I serve in Louisiana, and grateful for that. We're in the season of Carnival, Mardi Gras in Louisiana, so laissez bon temps rouler, and we're going to have an afternoon of, they've got beads and anything like that you might want back there at their table. But as we begin the afternoon session, I'd like to thank the Committee on Presiding Officers for their confidence in the leadership of the bishops in this chair. I realize that there are a lot of people behind me that could be in this chair, and I'm honored and privileged to be with you this afternoon. I also give thanks for my colleagues, Bishop Strife and Bishop Bickerton, who are backing me up and whispering in my ear, and anything that we can do to help this afternoon go well for you, because our goal has been all along is to help you do your best work. Thank you also to the Secretary of the General Conference and the whole staff here who's been amazing throughout, and I'm just so appreciative of them. This has been a miracle to make this conference happen as quickly as they've done, so I'm thankful for you all very much. Also, I thank Dr. Leonard Young in advance. Lynn has been on this journey with the presiding officer as we've been trained for a while. And I thank you in advance for helping us through this process, Dr. Young. I'm sure that we were going to have a few missteps along the way. I know I will. So if you promise to extend a little bit of grace to me, I know that I will extend some grace to you, because I know you're going to have a few missteps even still this afternoon. I do want to take a minute here and acknowledge the hard work that you did yesterday in committee. These are incredibly weighty matters and decisions that impact not only you who are gathered here, but those people in the stands, those people back home in the mission field who still need to hear the good news of Jesus. I'd like you to imagine, yes, there is a bar here for the delegates, but this table extends around the world. So please don't forget that. I think we also need to acknowledge that there's a lot of pain and disappointment in this room, and also around the world for those who have been watching. But friends, we still have work to do. we still have work to do for the sake of the mission. So I pray that we'll work faithfully, that we'll work together with a heart of peace. I also remind you that this is worshipful work. Worship is not something we did on Saturday or early this morning. It's work that we continue to do. Bishop Carder, retired Bishop Carder, who is unable to be with us this week because he continues to do his own worshipful work as he cares for his spouse, shared these words on social media, and I asked him if I might be able to share them with you as we begin this session this afternoon. He said, "Authentic worship is inseparable from faithful work. The worship God desires overflows in the practice of mercy, justice, and compassion. And acts of mercy, justice, and compassion are forms of worship." So I pray that it may be so for us today, and thank Bishop Carter for allowing us to share those words. And finally, throughout these last few months, I've used Ephesians 4 as my daily prayer. And as we begin this afternoon, I invite you into a time of prayer with me as we're reminded once again of these words. "I, therefore, the prisoner in the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope of your calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in all. Amen." So we have work to continue, worshipful work. I'll do my best to keep us on task. We're going to pray a little, sing a little, and confer a little as we go along. And before we keep going, Gary Graves.
Bishop, as a part of that worshipful work and preparing for the deliberations that are before us, the Judicial Council Decision 1377 contained the phrase, "violates the principle of legality." I was asked during the lunch break for a definition of the principle of legality. We have researched and found that it is primarily included in Decision 1366. 1366. If you search the Judicial Council decisions, you will find the primary portions that would help you to find it on pages 3 and 35. Pages 3 and 35 of Decision 1366. The basic statement: as a tenet of United Methodist constitutionalism, the principle of legality means that all individuals and entities are equally bound by church law, which shall be applied fairly and without regard to race, color, national origin, status, or economic condition. It forbids selective or partial enforcement of church law at all levels of the connection. And it continues. So I refer that back to your own use as you continue your deliberations. Thank you, Bishop Harvey.
All right, we're going to do our best to pick up where we left off. We were back to the main motion on the traditional plan. According to our calculations here, we have had 3 speeches for the traditional plan and 1 against. So I will begin with a speech against the traditional plan. And by the way, we just kept the pool going that was here before we broke for lunch. So these are the same people that were in the pool before we went to lunch. So I'm going to invite Adam Hamilton to microphone number 1, if you would come forward, please.
Thank you, bishops, delegates. My name is Adam Hamilton. I'm the senior pastor at Church of the Resurrection, and I'm a part of the Great Plains Annual Conference. All right, I want to speak against the traditional plan that's before us, and I want to begin by confessing that I'm a bit confused as to what the WCA wants at this point. For the last 5 years, her leaders have asked for and been planning for an amicable separation. I thought you wanted to leave, and now it appears you want the rest of us to leave. Centrists and progressives never wanted a divorce. We never were looking for a gracious exit. We were looking for a little more space. The WCA said they wanted to leave because they were tired of fighting about this. But with the traditional plan that adds teeth, you've not only alienated progressives but also centrists. Do you think these churches will quietly accept this regressive traditional plan with teeth? Will these churches protest less or more for LGBTQ persons in the future? And I guess based upon the number of emails and text messages I've gotten over the last couple of days, I'd want the WCA to know, and I appreciate many of these are friends of mine, or at least have been, I hope they still are, but you've inspired an awful lot of people who are not really engaged in this struggle before. And for that, I thank you. You've inspired them to action. They're mad, they're upset, they're hurt. Now, before I say a bit more about this, I'd like to say a bit about biblical interpretation. I've listened to a lot of people talk about the Bible as though the rest of us don't love the Bible, read the Bible, interpret the Bible, understand the Bible. Paul says more about the role of women keeping silent in the church, praying with their heads covered, women not teaching men, women submitting to men, women not wearing jewelry, than he says about same-sex acts in the New Testament. Yet the WCA has clearly stated that they support women in ministry. You say that Paul had women in leadership. True. But despite this, he was clear women must not teach a man, and they are to remain silent. How did you get there? You interpreted the text in the light of the cultural context and with an ear to more important biblical ideas. Now, on Sunday, it was interesting that the highest priority for conversations chosen by our delegates was to talk about our pensions, even higher than the traditional plan. Interesting, given that Jesus said, "Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, and go sell all you have and give it to the poor." So I'd like to invite those of you who believe that the Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it, to turn in your pensions funds to fund the unfunded liabilities. Now, while there are 3 texts in the New Testament that speak of some kind of same-sex acts, there are over 100 that call for unity and working to stay together. I want to finally ask this. If you voted for the simple plan or the one church plan, would you please stand? And bishops, I'd like to ask if you would do the same. If you supported the simple plan or the one church plan, would you please stand?
Thank you. Just to let you know where we are. We have 3 speeches for and 2 against. We have a few people in the pool that would like to offer an amendment. And I will now ask John Miles to go to microphone number 2. He's still in my queue. Sorry about that. Trying to work my way around the room.
Is 4 okay?
Excuse me, hold on just a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
It appears that you're and on my screen you're gray, so that you're not back in the pool.
Oh, all right.
Have you inserted your card
have you
back
inserted
into
your
your
card
machine?
into your... Okay, and we'll go to the next person. I'll invite Tyler Edmondson to go to microphone number 1.
Good afternoon, Bishop.
Good afternoon.
My name is Tyler Amundsen. I'm a pastor in Billings, Montana in the Yellowstone Conference. I'd like to make a motion to amend. I would like to amend by deletion petition 90032 from the traditional plan. This is calendar item 18. In your ADCA, it's on page 182. In your DCA, it's on page 384.
Okay. Is there a second?
With your permission, I'll speak to it, Bishop.
Please.
In Philippians 1:27 through 29, it reads, "Most important, live together in a manner worthy of Christ's gospel. Do this whether I come and see you or I am absent to hear about you. Do this so that you stand firm, united in one spirit and mind as you struggle together to remain faithful to the gospel. That way you won't be afraid of anything your enemies do. Your faithfulness and courage are a sign of their coming, destruction and your salvation, which is from God. God has generously granted you the privilege not only of believing in Christ, but also suffering for Christ's sake." Before I left for this conference, I told a story to my congregation that said there was two brothers that lived together for a long time on farms next to each other. They lived together in peace. They shared equipment with each other to do the work of the fields. They worked hard to be in relationship with each other so that they could accomplish something. They could work together to grow things, to feed their families and feed their neighbors. Well, they got in a fight over a calf that one said was his and the other said was the other's. And so they continued to fight and fight until one night, one brother got up and he dug a trench from the pond up above so that there was a stream flowing between the two properties. That stream divided them. And then one day, a man was happening along after this stream had been built, and he said, "I'm a carpenter, I'll help you out." He said, "How can I help you?" And one of the brothers said, "My brother dug a stream through our property, and they're no longer connected. I want a fence built. I want a fence built between these two properties." Well, the man then went to town. And he came back, and the carpenter had done something that the man didn't want. He built a bridge across that river. Friends, we follow a carpenter named Jesus, who built a bridge across the river, who invited us to be and follow one another in unity. And if you look in Paul, if you look in the Gospels, it is much more about unity than a couple passages about human sexuality. Friends, we are called to be united as a church. So I invite you today to continue to consider voting against the traditional plan, and additionally, I invite you to vote for this amendment to delete petition 90032 from the traditional plan. Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you. It appears we have no one to speak against. Well, no. But there is a point of order that came up, and we've said we didn't want to interrupt your speeches, so I'm going to invite Carleen Fogel-Miller to go to microphone number 1. Please state what the issue is. The violation of the rule, page number would be helpful.
Carleen Fogel-Miller, lay delegate, Florida. I served as secretary, so I think I'm going to do this correctly based on my understanding of parliamentary procedure. The rule I'm referencing is Rule 12 on page 46. It falls under Section 3, Rights and Duties of Delegates in our Rules of Order. I'm also going to be referencing Section 7, subsection C, Committee on Ethics in our Plan of Organization on page 30. Rule 12 says a spirit of Christian conferencing is expected. I have heard rumors, and I have heard other delegates have heard them too, that there has been bribery, there has been the giving of money in exchange for votes in this body, and I would refer that to our Committee on Ethics, which is in order from the plenary by a 1/5 vote. I think that this is incredibly important for us to investigate, because if we are having to buy votes, there is something wrong with our church.
Thank you. This requires a 1/5 vote. So if you would get your devices awakened. So we're waiting for it to be on the screen. If you vote 1, yes, to send it to the Ethics Committee. If you are against, you push 2. Are you ready to vote? Let's vote. Requires 1/5. It'll take a moment to get that calculated and up on the screen. We are ready. If you will populate the screen for us. It passes. It's on the screen.
Stephanie Henry, if you will come to the stage, please.
Okay, we will go back to where we were. We were an amendment. Secretary, could you read that amendment for us one more time as we go back to the pool?
I'll be happy to do so. On calendar item 18, petition 90032, found on page 182 of the ADCA and the page 384 of today's DCA. Amend by deleting petition 90032 from the traditional plan. You would best be able to find the full text of the petition on page 182, as the committee item is simply the petition stands as submitted.
In the meantime, we have another point of order. If Sinisi T.A. Rogers will go to microphone number 2. Please state the rule. Anybody going to microphone number 2? Tanisi T.A. Rogers. There you go. Microphone number 2. Thank you.
Yes, Bishop. I was in the queue way before you recognized my being there, so it's of no moment now. Thanks.
Okay, now we are back to the amendment. Now we'll have a speech against the amendment. If Stephen Sparks will go to microphone number 1.
Stephen Sparks, Mississippi delegation, clergy. Just rising in opposition to the amendment by deletion. The additional language helps us be more clear in our definition of how do we define and how we judge whether someone is a self-avowed practicing homosexual. I think anytime we can be clearer and more precise in our language, it is more helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. If Dawn Taylor Storm will go to microphone number 4 for speech 4.
Thank you, Bishop. Dawn Taylor Storm, Eastern Pennsylvania. I rise to speak in favor of the amendment. I speak for all that are at home who are feeling betrayed, harmed, undermined by this work of the General Conference. I speak to you, friends at home, because the church is not the General Conference. I speak to you because as much as I love these 863 friends here, this conference is not a full expression of who we are as United Methodists. And hear me, friends, resurrection happens on the 3rd day, not because people voted for it. Resurrection happens on the 3rd day because the movement of God could not be legislated. You see, God does not depend on a majority vote. God is not contained by any boxes we seek to create. Resurrection happened because those told to be silent and in full submission finally found their voice and proclaimed what they had seen and heard. Resurrection happened because people came out of their boxes and doors, and like JJ who led us yesterday, they began to tell a different story, a story not of control or power or dominance, but a story of one who gave his life not for some, but for all. A story of one who made their hearts burn because his grace was free and not merited, not meant for only some, but a grace, an amazing grace, meant for all. Resurrection happened because Jesus is the one in the face of legislation called out these words, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they have done. And then this same Jesus refused to give up on us. On Sunday morning, many of us will stand in pulpits and we will look out at the church, not the General Conference. And oh, what a beautiful church! What a beautiful church it is.
I'd like to remind you of a couple things when you come to the microphone. I know you are passionate, and we appreciate that, but slow down so that the interpreters can track your message. And if you would, also please leave the microphone on the stand. That'll also help us be able to hear, the interpreters be able to hear you in the back, and us to be able to hear you better here in this room. So now we have had 2 for, 1 against. I'm going to invite Fred Saye to microphone number 2 for a speech against.
Thank you, Bishop. Sorry. Can you help me? This. Okay, I got it. Thank you. So, Bishop, the message here is that the various petitions as contained in the traditional plan are those petitions that make the plan what it is. Briefly or concisely, I want to commend and encourage my fellow delegates to vote against this amendment that is attempting to delete the petition in question. Vote no to this amendment so that the traditional plan can sustain its importance. Thank you.
Thank you. If Joe Daniels will go to microphone number 3. And let us know why you are coming to the microphone, please.
Thank you, Bishop. Joe Daniels, Baltimore, Washington Conference. I have a question. Yesterday, I came to the mic asking for clarity around questions around money, particularly as it pertained to the disaffiliation actions that will impact pensions and conference reserves. I stand here as a representative, like all of us, for the whole church, but I particularly stand here along with other colleagues as one who represents the Black church, the Black congregation that I represent predominantly has persons from 24 different nationalities.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I need to ask you what your question is, and if you're talking about the other petitions having to do with disaffiliation, we are not there yet. We are on the amendment.
I've been in the queue since this morning.
I appreciate that.
And if I will be invited back to ask my question, I would be honored to do so, but I have questions that will allow us not to walk in the dark as we're considering these votes that we're about to take, but that we will get the necessary financial information from the persons of our General Conference.
Yes, sir.
Who
we
have
will.
To, for the last 2.5 years, been working on.
You can, when we get to that point, you could get back into the pool and ask your question along with the other folks in the pool. Thank you. We've got 2 for, 2 against. If I invite Ali Shahan, I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, to microphone number 2 for a speech for. We're still on the amendment.
Thank you, Bishop. I am a mom, and a lesson that I have to teach my kids again and again is that there will be times in which our decisions will harm others, even when that is not our intention. We may have good intentions, but when our actions harm others, we then need to reevaluate. I believe that is what is happening today. There is a lot of well-meaning behind the traditional plan, but it is indeed causing harm, and friends, we need to reevaluate. I am a 32-year-old, and I am one of the youngest delegates here. For a denomination who claims to so desperately want young people in our churches, maybe we need to reevaluate. Now, I would like to ask for those of you who feel comfortable to raise a hand if you have a child or a grandchild who has left our church. For a denomination who claims to so desperately want young people in our churches, maybe it's time we reevaluate. While young LGBTQIA+ suicide rates are skyrocketing, the response we have cannot be, "Come to my church where we will baptize you and nurture you in your growth in ministry," but only until God calls you into ministry. I am unsure of many things, but here is what I do know. The voting of this body has not reflected the voice of the majority of our young people. This body is not where the disciple making happens. Thank the good Lord, am I right? In America, our young people are told time and time again that they are not enough. Their friends are telling them they're not enough. Our society tells them they're not enough. And now, this traditional plan is asking me to go back home and tell all of these young people that I work with that now our church is telling them that they're not enough. I can't do that. This body does not get to decide who God affirms, and this body does not get to decide who God calls into ministry. Please vote for yes for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me remind you once again to speak to the amendment. These aren't speeches for or against the main motion. We are on the amendment. And while I appreciate again your passion and your desire, we need to stay on task on what we are doing. We have one person in the pool to speak against, Sergey Kim. If you'll go to microphone number 1, I'm going to give also just a few minutes. This will also be a test because I know we've had some issues with the Russian translation. So we're going to just go slowly on this one. So Sergey Kim, if you will, we'll give you a thumbs up when it's time. Let's give it a try.
Dear Bishop,
go ahead.
Продолжайте. I am against this amendment because the petition of traditional plan, the petition that was under discussion, the petition that was before us, it had been already thoroughly prepared, and making this amendment ruins the work, and our opponent are trying to lead us astray. They're trying to lead us away from the traditional plan. That is why I came out to express my position, and I am encouraging brothers and sisters, those who support traditional plan, to be alert and to be very cautious when they are voting, because first there is a petition, then those who are for one church plan and those who are for simple plan, they try to amend the petition, and actually those amendments cancel out all the positions that were expressed in petitions according to traditional plan. That is why I'm against. I'm against this amendment to the petition for traditional plan. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've had 3 speeches for, 3 speeches against. We need to prepare to vote On the amendment, I'm going to ask the secretary to read it one more time so that we make sure that you know what you are voting on.
The amendment is to delete petition 90032 from the traditional plan. The petition text is located on ADCA page 182.
Okay, I'm going to invite you to get your voting devices ready. Ready to put that up on the screen? If you favor this amendment, you press 1. If you're opposed to the amendment, you press 2. You may vote now. If you'll project the results on the screen. Not that? Amendment does not pass. We are back to the main motion. We're having to, every time we take a vote, we have to refresh our screen. So if you'll just give me a couple seconds. We've had 3 speeches for, 2 against, so I will call at this point Emmanuel Cleaver to go to microphone number 4 for a speech against, and then we'll move on.
Emmanuel Cleaver III, Missouri. There's a story in the Gospel of Matthew of Jesus feeding the multitudes. It actually says that he fed, or 5,000 men were counted, not including women and children. That means more people were not counted than those who were actually counted. The reason why only the men were counted is because the disciples counted people who were just like them. That means they overlooked people who were not like them. This plan counts one issue under the guise of biblical authority, one issue, but it overlooks other important and pressing issues. It overlooks taking a hard stance when unarmed black men are shot and killed by those who give an oath to protect them. What this plan overlooks is taking a hard stance on gender pay equality. What this plan overlooks is the fact that there are a number of social ills that we are simply not talking about. We are bringing up one issue when this denomination is overlooking some problems of its own. For one, there are many women who will not be appointed to serve as senior pastors in some of our largest churches. We're overlooking that. We're also overlooking that many African Americans are very limited in the number of appointments they can actually serve. We're actually overlooking the fact that this denomination, as of 2019, the South Central jurisdiction has never elected a black woman to serve in the episcopacy. We are overlooking the fact that the South Central jurisdiction tried to force a black bishop to retire under the disguise of ineffectiveness, when we have current bishops who are ineffective and some who should not have been elected in the first place. When you look at the story, the disciples counted people who were like them, but Jesus fed everyone. Even those who weren't there, there was stuff left over. If we're going to get biblical, let's get real biblical.
Those of you delegates, I know again you're passionate on a lot of these issues, but I invite you, no applauding, no cheering. I'm now going to invite Holly Grant to microphone number 2. I believe you have an amendment.
Bishop, I move to amend by substitution petition 90037 on page 185 of the ADCA and calendar item number 6, page 383 of the DCA.
Is there a second? Repeat the numbers one more time just for us, please.
Petition 90037
page
on
number?
Page 185 of the ADCA, calendar item number 6 on page 383 of the DCA.
Give us a minute to locate those. Got them? Okay. Is there a second? Okay.
I would amend by substitution, removing the parts that's currently underlined in the ADCA and replacing it with the following. Prior to being nominated for membership on the Board of Ministry by the bishop, any individual must certify to the bishop that he or she will uphold enforcement and maintain the Book of Discipline in its entirety, including but not limited to all the qualifications for ordination, parentheses, paragraphs 304, 330, 335, 336, the end of the paragraph. Additionally, the bishops must certify to uphold, the bishops must certify to the annual conference secretary that he or she only has nominated individuals who will uphold, enforce, and maintain the Book of Discipline in its entirety, including but not limited to the qualifications for ordination, in parentheses, paragraphs 304, 330, 335, and 336. And I will speak to this if I may. I can get this copy to you.
Thank you.
Second?
There was. Let me
Yes.
put my name on this really quick so you can have it. Bishop, this change to the paragraph makes it so that we are not just singling out sexuality concerns. It fixes the Judicial Council's concern they had with this amendment. This does not require anyone to believe certain things about human sexuality or other issues. This simply requires that when people are set apart for an important leadership position of screening and reviewing candidates for the privilege of ordained ministry in our church, that they agree to do the basic job the church has asked them to do. And this is just one of only 8 amendments that would be needed to bring the traditional plan into compliance with the Judicial Council. And I would hope that the bishop allows us to do this in a fair way.
Thank you. Would you read that amendment for us?
I will read the amendment. You want me?
I'm
going to ask the secretary to do that. Thank you. Thank you.
I move to amend by substitution for petition number 90037 on page 185 of the ADCA, which amends discipline paragraph 635.1a concerning the composition of the, okay, what you wrote on the motion form is not the text. So the text must be the page that you have attached to the back. Is that correct, Holly?
Making our way back.
Have the attached page right in your hand.
I do, but the question is, on the attached page, there are bold text, there are not bold text, there are underscores.
It's just what I read, right there, and it just needs to be substituted in.
Substitute all that is underscored.
I substituted all that was underscored in the
Correct.
ADCA.
Thank you.
With what is written there.
Okay, I was just wanting to make clear about the different types of font,
Okay.
and was that something
That does not need to be worried about.
Okay, thank you. We'll care for it.
Okay. This is an amendment, not a substitute. Got it? Okay. All right. I'm looking in the pool here for a speech against this amendment. I'm going to invite Mark Holland to microphone number 1.
That's the bold language.
Brothers and sisters in Christ, I stand to speak against the motion for this substitute to certify people, because what it does is it elevates our book of discipline above the Bible. And it says we're going to certify everything that's in this brown book, but we're not going to certify everything that's in the Bible. And when we elevate this, we've entered an era of the Pharisees that cannot stand. I want to read from the gospel, if I might, the other half of Matthew 19 that's been ignored in our deliberations. Whoever divorces his wife except for unchastity and marries another commits adultery. And I'm convinced that there might be bishops on the stage who are guilty by Jesus' red letters. I'm convinced there are people in the bar of this general conference pushing a button to oppress people for the first half of Matthew 19 who are guilty of the second half. And Jesus has words, if I can continue with the red letters in Matthew 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you neglect the weightier things of the law, justice and mercy. Where is the mercy? for the people in this group who are hurting. Whatever the One Church plan would have done to your church, this hateful traditional plan will do to our churches. We had ours voted down. I'm asking you to lay down the sword. But we owe it to our brothers and sisters in Christ who are LGBTQ, who have been harmed, to never let this traditional plan pass. And to that end, I have picked up my stack for amendments. And we're going to amend until the monster trucks roll in at 6:30.
Mark.
I just want to say, so I want every OCP person to vote against every call for the question. We will not be certified. We will not be Pharisees. We are going to play your...
Friends, please, please. I'm going to invite now, there's a point of order for Rook Shacom to come to microphone number 2. We are talking, by the way, point of order, microphone number 2. Would you mind speaking up, please?
Rukang Chicomb, Northwest Katanga.
Thank you.
My point
What
of
rule
order,
is being violated, if you would?
It is the Rule 18, distracting behavior.
What page?
On the page 48, Rule 18. Bishop, we came to do the job. I remember when I was growing up, a missionary
Okay,
called.
thank you. This isn't a time for a speech. You've pointed out the
Thank
point of
you,
order, so
and-
I thank you, and it is well taken, and I will invite the House. We've got work to do. We've got a 6:30 hard stop, and that will include worship. So I'm going to invite you to stay on task, stay to the point. Don't use the time to give your speeches for and against unless it's the appropriate time for a speech for and against. It's not a time to disparage one another. This is a time for us to do the work that is in front of us. So I'm going to now invite Kara Nicholas to microphone number 2 for a speech 4.
Kara Nicholas, Oklahoma Conference. This amendment respects the decision of the Judicial Council, and we just ask for integrity from our leaders. We ask that we restore our covenant where it is broken. So vote yes to this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now invite, we've had 2 speeches for, 1 against. So I'm going to invite Kim Ingram to microphone number 2.
I will begin by explaining that this relates, as the work of the Board of Ordained Ministry has to do with qualifications for ordination. My dear brothers and sisters from around the world, I humbly greet you in the strong name of Jesus Christ. I am Kim Ingram, a member of the University Senate, and specifically a member of the Commission on Theological Education. I stand to speak on behalf of the Association of United Methodist Theological Schools, which voted yesterday to authorize this statement. The association is composed of the heads of the 13 seminaries of the United Methodist Church: Boston School of Theology, Candler School of Theology at Emory, Claremont School of Theology, Drew University Theological School, Duke Divinity School, Gammon Theological Seminary, Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary, Iliff School of Theology, Methodist Theological School in Ohio, Perkins, St. Paul's, United, and Wesley. Ever since the General Conference in Portland, our United Methodist students and those who are considering seminary have been waiting to see what will happen in St. Louis at the special session of the General Conference. Most of the students are young, with the majority under 30 years old. Public opinion polls in the United States clearly demonstrate that younger people in this country, including deeply devoted Christians, do not want to organize their spiritual and church lives around the question of excluding LGBTQIA persons. It is clear to the heads of the seminaries that if the traditional plan passes, many students and prospective students will decide there is no place for them in this denomination. If the traditional plan passes, the United Methodist Church will very soon lose an entire generation of leadership in the United States. This may not be true in Africa or elsewhere in the world, but the future of the United Methodist Church in this country is at stake. The NASCM also had a statement about the colleges and the students and the United Methodist colleges that may leave if this decision is made. I support United Methodist education and encourage you to vote against this amendment.
Thank you. Now going to move to speech 4. If Gregory Gross could go to microphone number 1. Before you just go, make sure we're still on the amendment?
Yep.
Okay,
still
good.
on the amendment.
We're on task. Thanks.
I'm Gregory Gross. I am clergy delegate from Northern Illinois. And I rise in favor of this amendment because, let's be honest, what this is really about. This is to try to bring this amendment, the traditional plan, to make it constitutional. Because as we heard this morning, it is sickeningly unconstitutional. And let's be honest, the original was trying to keep me out. I am a man. I am an ordained deacon, and I am a man who loves another man. That's who I am. So let's be equal opportunity here. Let's really investigate people that we name to the Board of Ordained Ministry in our candidates. So let's really investigate. You know, that celibacy and singleness, fidelity in marriage. Let's investigate all of the clergy and the laity that we're going to appoint to the Board of Ordained Ministry. Have you committed adultery? Have you been committed to your spouse? Have you? I confessed. How about those of you here? You want to confess? No? How about those of you on the stage? Want to confess? Okay, maybe that's a little too far. Have you really followed the entire book of discipline? All of you? Have you had every special Sunday? An offering for every special Sunday? That's in the book of discipline. Let's investigate. So yes, I'm in favor of this amendment so that we can all be on an equal footing. If you're going to go after me, let's go after everyone. Because I believe the Bible also says, let he without sin cast the first stone. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had 3 speeches for and 2 against the amendment. I'm going to invite Emily Allen, if you'd make your way to microphone number 4.
Thank you, Bishop. Emily Allen, California, Nevada. Yesterday, the Legislative Committee worked on petitions 90033, 90034, and 90035, making amendments that we were told would bring them into constitutionality. We heard today that those amendments did not, in fact, make them constitutional. And so I hear this amendment today that I am told will make this petition constitutional, and once again, I don't believe it. I believe that this amendment does not go far enough to make this petition constitutional. It still encourages the selective or increased observation of some of the parts of Book of Discipline over others, even though it says including but not limited to. That is still encouraging selective and partial application of the Book of Discipline, as I quote from the Judicial Council decision 1366. So I have to tell you, when we are told that all of the amendments coming before us today will bring the petitions into alignment with the Judicial Council decision, I want you to question whether they actually will. We already know that the ones we were told about yesterday did not do so. I think this work is flawed. I think this amendment is flawed. I think you need to consider carefully whether all of the amendments which were planned before this conference's Judicial Council decisions really will bring us into alignment with the Constitution. I am not convinced, and I urge you to consider very carefully whether the work we do will end up being constitutional. So sure, make your amendments. I will vote against every single one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. We've had 3 speeches for and 3 against, which means we need to go to a vote on the amendment. Repeat the amendment one more time.
The amendment is to petition 90037. Strike the words that are included in the petition on page 185 and insert the following. Prior to being nominated for membership on the Board of Ministry by the bishop, any individual must certify to the bishop that he or she will uphold enforce, and maintain the Book of Discipline in its entirety, including but not limited to all the qualifications for ordination. See parentheses, paragraphs 304, 330, 335, 336. Additionally, the bishop must certify to the annual conference secretary that he or she only has nominated individuals who will uphold, enforce, and maintain the Book of Discipline in its entirety, including but not limited to the qualifications for ordination. See parentheses, paragraphs 304, 330, 335, 336. The text continues as it is in the original paragraph.
All right. Let's get ready to vote.
We have an electronic signal.
You'll hold on just one moment. We have an electronic signal issue. I don't know what that means.
We're about to learn.
All right. We are going to improvise. We're going to be nimble. We've got the camera on the computer. So if you are ready to vote in favor of the amendment, you press 1. If you're voting on the amendment, 1, yes, 2, no. You may vote now. I believe we're ready. If you'll put the decision on the screen. On the amendment, it passes. Yep. It's passed. Okay. So this is what we're going to do. We've got to address this technology, otherwise these guys are going to have to sit there and hold this computer for the rest of the day. So if you'll just give us, let's take a 10-minute break and let them address the challenge that we have here, and we'll be right back.